why people are shouting hammer, but the hammer, we've used the hammer as a symbol of the forces of oppression, if you like, in the thing. And the worms are the thinking part. Where it goes into the waiting sections...
Waiting for the worms to come, waiting to cut out the dead wood.
Yeah, before it goes waiting to cut out the dead wood, you hear a voice through a loud hailer. It starts off by, it goes testing 1, 2 or something, and then it says, we will convene at 1 o'clock outside Brixton Town Hall. And it's describing the situation of marching towards some kind of National Front rally in Hyde Park, or anybody, I mean the National Front, and what we have in England, but it could be anywhere in the world. So all that shouting and screaming on it, because you can't hear it, you see. If you listen very carefully, you might hear Lambeth Road, and you might hear Vauxhall Bridge, and you might hear the words Jew boys or something. We may encounter some Jew boys. I think it's just me ranting on.
Who puts him on trial?
He does.
He puts himself on trial?
Yes. The idea is that the drugs wear off, and in waiting for the worms, he keeps flipping backwards and forwards from his real, or his original persona, if you like, which is a reasonably kind of humane person, into this waiting for the worms to come persona, which is flipped and is ready to crush anybody or anything that gets in the way, which is a response to having been badly treated and feeling very isolated. But at the end of waiting for the worms, it gets too much for him, that oppression, and he says stop. I don't think you can actually hear the word stop on the record, or maybe you can. Anyway, it goes stop.
Yeah, it's very quick.
Record. Yeah, it's very quick. And then he says, I want to go home, take off his uniform and leave the show. But he says, I'm waiting in this prison cell because I have to know if I've been guilty all this time. So, and then he tries himself, if you like. So the judge is part of him just as much as all the other characters of things that he remembers. They're all in his mind. They're all memories. Anyway, at the end of it all, his judgment on himself is to de-isolate himself, which in fact is a very good thing.
So now it really has turned full circle.
Almost, yeah. That kind of circular idea is expressed in that thing of just snipping a tape at a certain point and sticking a bit on the front, that tune, this outside the wall tune at the end.
So the character in Outside the Wall says, all alone or in twos, the ones who really love you walk up and down outside the wall, some hand in hand, some gathering together in bands. The bleeding hearts of the artists make their stand, and when they've given you their all, some stagger and fall. After all, it's not easy banging your heart against some mad bugger's wall.
Yeah.
And that really is the statement of the album.
Yeah, and which I have no intention of even beginning to explain.
Roger, what will it actually be like when we see The Wall in concert?
Just like it normally is for a lot of people, who are all packed away behind PA systems and things. Like every seat in the house is sold, so there's always thousands of people over at the sides who can't see anything, And very often in rock shows the sound is dreadful because it costs too much to make it really good. In those kind of halls, the sound will be very good, mind you, at these shows, but it'll be the impediment to seeing what's going on and hearing what's going on will be symbolic rather than real.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the wall, which will stop people seeing what's going on.
Is the wall going to remain there?
No, not forever. No, not forever.
Who's going to knock it down?
Well, I think we should wait and see about that. For the live show, I think it would be silly, really, for me to explain to you everything that's going to happen in the live show that we put out. Mind you, anybody with any sense listening to the album ought to be able to spot whereabouts in the show it is that it comes down.
That's the physical wall now.
Yeah.
What about the psychological wall?
Well, that's another matter. That's another matter. Whether we make any inroads into that or not is anybody's guess. I hope so.
Roger Waters describing The Wall. And the success of the double album since the first broadcast of that programme, which of course was last November, is now just a matter of history. The Wall was America's #1 LP for 16 weeks. It reached number 3 over here, and it sold millions of copies worldwide. And of course it spawned the single Another Brick in the Wall that went to #1 both here and in America. The stage show has already been performed in Los Angeles and New York, and we in this country are going to have the opportunity to see the live show at London's Earl's Court between the 4th and the 9th of August. At least those of us who are lucky enough to have tickets. Now, once again, I really would like to thank Roger Waters for his time and to congratulate the Pink Floyd on being awarded the Silver Clef Award for services to the British music industry. And the Friday Rock Show, as always, is produced by...
And this week, the 70s Survivors. Although the advent of punk and the new wave hogged more headlines than any other musical event of the decade, it largely failed to shake the status or the sales of the establishment the rock revolutionaries had sought to overthrow. In some quarters, however, it did at least prompt some serious soul-searching. Compares Supertramp's live sound, and of course, the acknowledged masters of the stage show. Their ambitious concepts have created technical and logistical problems on an unprecedented scale. The production for The Wall, put together following the release of that album in 1979, was their biggest yet. Here's Dave Gilmour.
I never imagined we'd get up to something like 16 articulated tracks for a concert. We've got a stage, we've got all the PA, all the effects, all the components that make up all the things we do. We've got movie projectors, huge lighting rigs. We've got a cherry picker lighting units we had last time on the road, which are take a track each. There's 2 of those, and they're just like a huge low loader thing with a motor and wheels that you can drive around. It takes a whole truck just for one of those. So there's 2 of those, and we carry absolutely everything around with us that we need to do a show, and that's what it takes. And this is like doing what we want to do. We can do what we want to do the way we want to do it on the scale that we want to do it, and that's what we're doing in these shows. At the same time as that, it does get to be sort of a bit of a trap, because you more or less have to do it that way for the Pink Floyd.
Dead is blown across the ocean.
As the album went on, we did have ideas of how we wanted to do the show. A lot of ideas came up during the making of it, but I don't think we've ever really tried to do anything because we thought it would be what the audience wanted. I don't think that's the way to work, is to just do what the audience wants, because then you just let yourself get brought down to a formula. I think we generally like to stretch every area we work in as much as possible. Like working in a studio, we never consider live performances when we're in the studio. We just do it as best as we can do in the studio and worry about how to reproduce it on stage afterwards.
We don't need no education.
Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. Although they enjoyed the shows themselves, the process of touring is viewed less enthusiastically. Here's Gilmour again.
It's not because it wouldn't make money or because it's too unwieldy to carry the whole thing around or anything like that. We just don't want to. Just don't want to do that. To do those long, drawn-out tours anymore. They don't do any of us any good. So it's kind of a shame, because doing the concerts is nice, but the whole trek of going all over the world, living out of suitcases for months on end and being up half the night and being up first thing next morning for aeroplanes and stuff is great fun when you're 20, but I'm nearly 34 and I'm the baby of the group.
Another musician who survived his share of tours through the 70s is Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page.
If it was...
Who puts him on trial?
He does.
He puts himself on trial.
Yes. The idea is that the drugs wear off, and in waiting for the worms, he keeps flipping backwards and forwards from his real, or his original persona, if you like. Why people are shouting hammer, but the hammer, we've used the hammer as a symbol of the forces of oppression, if you like, in the thing. And the worms are the thinking part. Where it goes into the waiting sections.
Waiting for the worms to come, waiting to cut out the dead wood.
Yeah, so all that shouting and screaming on it, because you can't hear it, you see. If you listen very carefully, you might hear Lambeth Road, and you might hear Vauxhall Bridge, and you might hear the words Jew boys or something. We may encounter some Jew boys. I think it's just me ranting on, which is a reasonably kind of humane person, into this waiting for the worms to come persona, which is flipped and is ready to crush anybody or anything that gets in the way, which is a response to having been badly treated and feeling very isolated. But at the end of waiting for the worms, it gets too much for it. Before it goes waiting to cut out the dead wood, you hear a voice through a loud hailer. It starts off by, it goes testing 1, 2 or something, and then it says, we will convene at 1 o'clock outside Brixton Town Hall. And it's describing the situation of marching towards some kind of National Front rally in Hyde Park, or anybody, I mean the National Front, and what we have in England, but it could be anywhere in the world.